Hi, folks. Wiatta, I think you're on mute.
Hello. Hello, everyone. So are we live now? Yes. Hello. Is everyone there? You're here. Okay, great. Great. So we'll give everyone give this a little bit more time for people to come in. Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome
Hello.
to Muthi. Are you off mute? I'd love to have my panelists off mute with me. So welcome everyone to our panel on water access, water availability. This is built to be broken, water access and availability in Africa. And so I'm going to jump right in and talk about our topic at hand. The statistics are well known. In 2017, more than 884 million people did not have access to safe drinking water, while 2 billion people around the globe are living in regions experiencing water stress. These figures are projected to rise. In 2015, at the conclusion of Millennium Development Goals, the global targets for water access were met 5 years ahead of schedule. However, for sub-Saharan Africa, at the current rate of progress, the 2015 MDG targets won't be met until 2030, which is the target end year for the current global agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals. Even with the SDGs, water is recognized as a central threshold resource for sustainable development, vital for achievement in other areas, including health, education, and poverty reduction. According to water.org, the world needs $114 billion annually until 2030 to reach everyone with sustainable water, and big world players such as international development agencies suggest much of this money should be invested in technical innovations and solutions to get water to the people. New pipe systems, new boreholes, more solar-powered water supply systems, But is it that simple? Is more investment in technology going to actually solve Africa's water accessibility problem? This is the topic that we're going to be discussing today with our panelists. Just to introduce myself, my name is Wiatta Thomas. I am the co-founder and CEO of AquaFarms Africa, based out of Guinea. We are a company that focuses in sustainable food production through urban agriculture and conserving resources such as water. Mohamed El Mongy, hailing from Egypt, is the co-founder and steering team coordinator of NILE Journeys. We have also Muthi Nhlema.
Nhlema, yes.
Nhlema,
yes.
Nhlema. He told me not to hurt myself on that, but I still did. Hailing from Malawi, who's the founder and team leader of BASEflow, working in groundwater sustainability. And we also have Christelle Kwizera, who is a mechanical engineer and founder of Water Access Rwanda. I'd like to give each of them some time to also speak a little bit more about themselves and their work. Mongy, I'd love to start with you and your work with NILE Journeys.
Thank you, Wiatta. So the NILE Journeys is a platform of communities and citizens across the Nile Basin that work on regenerating the land and also healing social systems. And you might be wondering, like, why the social system is put in the lot. But let's have a look at the bigger perspective. So 75% of African population rely directly on fresh water. And moreover, most of our capital cities and our major cities are based either on the seashore or ocean shore or on freshwater bodies. We have 63 transboundary basins in Africa. So this ranges between the groundwater, aquifers, lakes, and rivers. Among the most known ones are the Congo River Basin, the Niger River Basin, the Nile, the Limpopo, the Lake Chad, the Zambezi, the Nubian Aquifer, the Okavango Delta as well, the Okavango Basin as well. So this makes the issue of water availability and water access very, very complex, because the interdependency is very, very high. And the interdependency does not rely only on technical solutions, but also on political aspects, on geographical locations, on environmental conditions, on many things. So we often talk about water availability. But water availability or water scarcity, is the opposite way of it, is basically referring to the volumetric abundance of water supply in any given area and the ratio of that in terms of human water consumption. The water availability depends on three major things. First, the climatic conditions, rainfall, water flow over the year, but also the periodicity and the seasonality of things. So sometimes it's not about also water scarcity, but too much water is actually also equally a problem. So that's the first factor. The second factor is population and how much population puts pressure on the access on the availability of water and water consumption supply. And the third factor is the geography. So where is your position in terms of proximity of water sources, water wells, from varying grassroots level to where is your position from downstream, upstream in terms of a larger basin. The fact that you have water availability does not mean that you have water access. Water access is a bigger realm and a bigger notion. So when we are talking about a water stressed the inaccessibility of water, this is a broader concept that depends on so many other factors. So first factor is the infrastructure. So the infrastructure, regardless of the use, either for drinking, herding, agriculture, fishing, urban consumption industry, but the infrastructure depends on the technology. And of course, the technology depends on the economic condition to have this technology available, which is not a given. In many countries in Africa, we have abundance of water, but we do not have even access for drinking water and use. The second factor that depends on it, the water access, is the policies and the governance. So the regional frameworks, the accountability, which I think will be spoken about later, the laws, the environmental laws, the usage of water, the pollution, and it includes in that the water pricing as well, if there is available. And those two elements in Africa, unfortunately, have been affected by something deeper than just the technology. And this is where I want to end. So factors like, for example, colonialism. The legacy of colonialism, breaking countries, made trouble in accessing water, because in some cases, the center became periphery. So they became disadvantaged, like, for example, the Nubian region in Sudan and Egypt, for example. In some aspects, water agreements and borders that share these water agreements are based on colonial legacies that we inherited until today. The privileged, so some centers that have been closer to the colonial powers were actually now the evolved urban centers that have much better infrastructure and much better affluence and wealth to access water. So you easily find the urban centers have more access to rural aspects. And also other things other than colonialism is wars, for example. The example is South Sudan. Basically, some areas do not have access now to available water for them just because of the influence of war. And also one more factor that made colonialism such a crucial thing is the prior appropriation of some water sources that was given to some groups, countries, nations, also like regions within countries, that enabled some spaces and some regions within country to flourish as opposed to others. And the effect on water is not only technical. The effect on water is very much social. Look at Lake Chad, for example. The shrinking of Lake Chad affected the insurgents of Boko Haram militants, for example, moving from one country, from Nigeria, affecting all the Lake Chad, the 4 Lake Chad nation, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mongy. That was really, really interesting, really talking about social inhibitors of water access. I'd love to move to Muthi from Malawi, BASEflow. Hi, Muthi.
Hi, Wiatta. Hi, everyone. My name is Muthi Nhlema. I'm from Malawi, but at the moment I'm in Iowa. I run an organization called BASEflow that's focused on groundwater sustainability. Why groundwater? In the Malawian context where I'm from, 62% of the population depends on groundwater for their livelihoods and agriculture. And of course, I could throw all sorts of numbers and figures at you, but I think let me probably speak as a kind of whistleblower for my sector. I've been in the development sector for quite some time, specifically in the water sector for a long, long time. And for the most part, I was quiet regarding the wrongs and the solutions that we were claiming to be bringing, which were not actually solutions. The multiple failures that I was a part of when I was part of various network organizations, development organizations, and yet not being held accountable for it. I created BASEflow because I got tired of simply being silent and saying, well, as long as I'm getting a salary, but yet I know that the solutions I'm implementing in the field, the water supply solutions that we are implementing in the field, are falling apart. And that is something that I personally got tired of, and which is why I set up BASEflow. I'll talk a lot more about these failures when we actually get into the presentation, but that's who I am and why I exist. I see myself as a sector disruptor, to actually talk about the things that we are failing at openly and honestly as a way of trying to start the conversation at solving those problems. And I'll be sharing some of those failures with you today.
Thank you, Muthi. Much appreciated. Christelle, can you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about your work.
Thank you, Wiatta. I always love speaking after Muthi because he's like my brother. Everything in his sector is my sector too. So in 2014, I started digging boreholes to serve safe water in East Rwanda, and quickly realized that the pictures I was sending to my donors about the working water points were lasting way longer than the water pumps we were installing. And this wasn't just my project. I really also quickly discovered that broken and unrepaired water pumps are a dirty open secret of the rural water sector. We know they don't function for long, yet every year, pumps are still being sponsored the same way they've been for years. And this is why, despite years of intervention, many millions of Africans still don't have access to safe water. And they are mainly in rural areas where these broken interventions are being made. So I strongly believe that not every water point is created equal, and that proper operation and long-term maintenance is as critical as building a new water point. Yeah. And that's why at Water Access Rwanda, we strongly believe in creating better water points that deliver safe water, and that is piped in a convenient manner. So we're looking at providing a service that people can pay for, not because it's medicine or safe water is good for you, but really offer them convenience. We also offer maintenance to make sure the water keeps running, and we prevent the need for maintenance by doing preventive care, because things do break, but you can delay that breaking time by taking care of things. And we are for profit for a reason, because we believe long-term profitability in the water sector is a must to drive more capital in the sector. So the impact of safe water is massive, obviously. For me, the quickest example is one of our customers called Hadija. Having safe water at home means she no longer has to wake up at 3 a.m. to wait at the nearest water point. She can finally trust the water that comes through her tap. She can do laundry at home, trust the water her kids drink, and has more time to play with her baby instead of washing loads and loads of laundry by a riverbank every day when she has a baby. And we aspire to convert every broken borehole currently in rural Africa into a safe water mini-grid that can deliver safe water piped conveniently right into people's homes, because piped water is not a new technology. It is not a modern technology. It is something that should be accessible to everybody. And I believe it's time that we work to make sure that we reduce lines at public systems and offer piped water right inside homes. And we can do this in a way that makes a lot of money. Then we'll have most people wanting to invest in similar systems. And as a sub-Saharan African myself, a Rwandan, I believe it's long overdue that people have this level of convenient access to something we need to breathe. Like the same way we need air to breathe, we need water to live. Water is life, and not having convenient access to it is simply condemning people to spending money and time having hardship accessing something they need to actually live. So that is what my work is about, and I'm really excited to dive into this conversation. It's a conversation we don't have enough of. There is so much that happens to say, oh, look at people like Hadija who now have clean water, but we never point the limelight to what happens after those beautiful ceremonies. And the reality we're going to see is that most of those water points will not be functional. As I started off saying, not every water point is created equal. So I'm really happy to be part of this conversation with sector leaders in other countries in Africa.
Thank you so much, Christelle, for that introduction. This is, and also Muthi, this is really what excites me about this conversation, is because we're getting to the meat of it. We're getting to the what's really behind water access and availability and the work that's being done on the ground. What are the issues? And what are the problems in interventions that we continue to repeat over and over again? I want to go back quickly to Mongy just to ask a question. You were speaking, Mongy, about some transboundary issues, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the societal inhibitors and boosters for water cooperation across these boundaries?
So I can summarize this in two things. So it's a worldview and capacities or skills, honestly. So when I would like to cooperate with someone, as an individual, as a group, as a nation, and beyond, I need a worldview that is transcendental to trauma, a worldview that identifies with each other, and a worldview that enables people to share information and understand each other and empathize with each other. This has been broken because of history of collective trauma. And it's basically, the Nile is a very good example. So we basically do not speak each other languages because of heritage of colonialism, way before the British and the French. For example, notions about, let's say, for example, sub-Saharan Africa, it's a separative notion that was portrayed and that was dumped into us from external organizations. But if you look at water systems, they don't know all these notions. So we need to biomimic the water because at the end, the soil of where the runs this water is a common soil, is an African soil. The people who share this water, we share 80% of our DNA before even speaking languages. We share 80% of our makeup as a human beings together. So this holistic worldview is the one thing. The second thing that is really important is the collaborative capacity, which means that trust, conflict transformation, these are basic things when you have people on a negotiation table that want to speak for peace, but they are men of war. It just doesn't, it's, you know, so, or they want to, either they want to advocate trust for everyone and diversity, while in their home they have tribal conflicts and they even have gender conflicts. So it starts from way beyond water issues.
I love that. So I love the rhetoric there. It really, and it also undergirds everything we're talking about. This is far more than just technology. It's far more than just throwing a water pump into a village. There's so much social history that is undergirding the issues with water access and availability that a lot of the industry just don't know about. They don't dig deep enough to understand these other social and historical issues that are really central to the issues of water access. I would like to now jump to, on that note, Muthi. I'd love to start with a quick video on accountability. What exactly is, which is really central to what he's doing with BASEflow. And I want to ask him about his context, specifically in Malawi, the different challenges that are affecting water access, and that we're not talking about enough. And one of those things is accountability, in terms of where the funds are going. So let me share this video quickly with everyone.
Why is accountability so important? If you look at almost any area of life, there are tools, mechanisms, processes, and systems centered around the singular idea of accountability. Take politics, for example. Politicians love to make promises, but they also love to break those promises. If the people aren't happy with the politician, they can kick him out by the ballot or sometimes by the bullet, like what they did recently in Zimbabwe. If you look at the business world, if a company breaks the law, like a holiday resort dumping human waste into a major river, that company could be sued, shut down, lose profits, or could get fined by the government. In all these situations, accountability was at play. It keeps people, businesses, and governments in check so they do what they promised. Accountability is meant to protect all of us, but it doesn't work all the time for everyone. Let me explain. In Malawi, most communities access their water through hand pumps that are installed by drilling companies who are often paid by NGOs, who often get their money from big, powerful foreign donor agencies. Drilling companies drill new wells, usually without government supervision. Communities celebrate, donors and NGOs fly in and take pictures for annual reports that no one ever reads. Then they leave, believing they've helped the community they've left behind. But have they? A growing pool of evidence is showing that hand pumps break down long before the expiry date, sometimes within 2 years. One key reason for this is poor construction. That is, the drilled holes aren't deep enough, which could lead to dry wells during the summertime. It is not uncommon to find that well depth in drilling reports don't match the actual depth of the well on site. So basically, when the communities received the hand pump, they were receiving a long-term liability, a bad product. And communities have to bear the maintenance cost of these failed wells. But when NGOs are queried about why hand pumps break down, if you're lucky to find those NGOs, you'll often hear, "It is the community's responsibility to fix them. We did our part." And these NGOs keep getting more and more funding. Is this fair? But who should be held accountable for these failed wells? Is it the government that's considered by many to be too weak to enforce its own laws? Is it the donor who pressurizes the NGO to drill, drill, drill? Or is it the NGO who worships the donor and tells the donor what they think the donor wants to hear? Or is it the drilling company who is forced to cut corners to make profit and stay in business? Accountability is complex, I know, but we have to start somewhere. Here are 2 ideas to help us get started. Number 1, raising awareness. Some people are simply in the dark when it comes to Malawi's water laws. This is where the government and NGOs can work together to raise awareness about Malawi's water laws and their implications for communities, drilling companies, and NGOs across the country. Number 2, tracking performance. We need a management information system to help track the functionality performance of water investments by donor, NGO, and drilling company. This will give us a basis for rewarding good performers, that is, compliant NGOs get more funding and good drillers get more business, while bad performers are publicly blacklisted. Accountability works in politics and in business. Why not in Malawi's water sector? If we remain silent, indifferent, or keep our heads in the sand, we may be sitting on a potential crisis of our own making, but whose costs will be borne by the rural communities everyone claims to be helping. It's now or never. It can't wait.
Thank you.
I
I love
absolutely,
this.
absolutely love that video. It speaks to everything that has been my experience in working in development and working with development agencies and with the international donor community for the last decade of my life. Thank you. Thank you for vocalizing it. So please tell us more about what are the challenges affecting water access on the continent that we're not talking about enough.
Well, I think one of the major problems we have on the continent, and I'll speak from the Malawi's perspective, is that with the Millennium Development Goals, as you gave in your opening introduction, in Malawi, for example, there was a massive push. It's of course from government, but as well as international development agencies, to make sure more people have water. And that was a noble idea. Nobody was against that. So back in the 90s, Malawi's water coverage, that is the number of people that actually have water, was something low, mid 40%. Like, so mid 45% of the country had access to water. Before 2015, Malawi managed to reach 89%. We beat our MDG target before the 2015 deadline. So Malawi was one of the few countries in sub-Saharan Africa and in the world to achieve that. And of course, there was celebration and everything. In Southern Africa, we were second to Botswana. Botswana had 95%, but we'll catch up to them. But so we made this massive move, and a lot of it was because of investment in infrastructure, a lot of drilling of boreholes. In the video, I talk about donors saying drill, drill, drill. It was drill, drill, drill for almost 20 years. And the numbers seem to suggest that there was water. But what the numbers don't tell you is that actually most of those systems were not installed, not installed properly, but were not actually working. So as Christelle was saying, you have the pictures of children drinking from a borehole, women dancing around a hand pump, when actually a few weeks after that picture, that hand pump was not working. It would fail completely. One of the things I stopped doing personally, and it's a personal conviction, I don't go to the field anymore. And the reason why I don't go to the field anymore is that when I go there, I come back very angry, because I find communities that have hand pumps that they were promised. The stories I would tell you, it's ridiculous. It just makes me livid. Now, if you could just share my slide on one of the headlines from my country. One of the things that my organization is doing or has done was part of a massive exercise to map every single water point in Malawi, now in rural Malawi. And the reason we wanted to do that with support from Malawi government and Scottish government was because we wanted to understand how many systems are out there. Now, the Malawi government estimated they had 77,000. We found over 100,000. However, 20,000 of them didn't work. And this is the headline in a major daily from my country. 20,000 boreholes are not working. Now, what does that mean in terms of numbers? Because 20,000, you might think, probably it's not much. Even if you were to put it at, let's say, $1,000 per hand pump, that's $20 million that's wasted. Now, to some countries, that might not be a lot of money. To Malawi, $20 million is 145% of our GDP. 145% of our GDP. We cannot afford this kind of wastage. Now, one of the reasons why this is happening, a lot of people place the blame on government, on communities, because communities are supposed to maintain these systems, and government is also supposed to provide the external support to maintain these systems. Actually, the blame should be pointed at the one pointing the finger, and the one pointing the finger is international development agencies in my country, because international development agencies have a lot of power because they get the money. NGOs get the money. They're the ones who have the money. And they're kind of pseudo government in my country. You can't have a meeting in the district council in my country if an NGO doesn't pay for it. That is how a government meeting, you can't have a government meeting if an NGO doesn't pay for it. This is how much power NGOs have. And they have so much power that if they do not follow the standards when they drill a borehole, like I said in the video, if a politician fails to fulfill their promises, they can get kicked out. If a pharmaceutical company doesn't provides a drug that kills people, that company can be taken to court. But in my country, if an NGO drills a borehole that does not provide water according to the government standard, and there are standards for this, nothing happens to that NGO, and they keep getting more funding. And some of the work that I'm doing at the moment is trying to use data to prove that these NGOs are not following the standards, and then working with local communities to hold these NGOs accountable. You have no idea how hard it is to hold these people accountable. Because, like, for example, you can go into the office, and I'm not just talking about NGOs, I'm talking about multilateral agencies. I'm talking about your World Banks. I'm talking about your DFIDs, your EUs. It is extremely difficult to go into these offices and say, can you please give me the drilling report for this borehole, which you said you drilled according to standard? Oh, we need to consult our superiors in London. Oh, we need to do whatever. In one particular case, I'm not kidding, one particular case, sorry, London was just an example, I'm not giving away whatever. But in one particular case, and I'll not reveal who this is, a drilling company refused to give us a drilling report because they had to consult their government. A drilling report of a borehole in Malawi, I can't get a report, and yet by law, I'm allowed to. This is how much power these international agencies have, because nobody wants to hold them accountable. No one. And the reason for that, and I spoke to a government official one time and asked him, why don't you want to hold these people accountable? Because they are breaking the law. And the response was, well, if we hold them accountable, they'll take their money elsewhere. So you see, this is what I mean. Yes, exactly.
Oh my gosh.
So you find that because of this power, like I said, NGOs, international NGOs, local NGOs are pseudo-government. Because they have power and the governments don't, they choose not to hold them accountable, so they stick around with their money. This is the challenge that we have in my country. And I want to just give one last example about this problem of a lack of accountability where NGOs can just get away with it. I mean, man, I've met, there was this one time we did an assessment on a borehole to see why it had failed. And it turned out that community should have never received that borehole, right? We went back to that community with the data, we simplified it, and we explained that actually, if you pump water from here, it should last you 4 hours nonstop. But apparently after 30 minutes, it goes dry. This borehole should have never been given to you. I remember these women were heartbroken and they said, and these NGOs made us dance for this.
Oh.
I mean, it was like, whoa. It's like, this is, and they made us dance for this. You see, and they were furious. And the last point about accountability that I want to add very quickly is on finance. You mentioned 114 billion. That sounds like a lot of money in dollars. In my country, between 2015 and 2020, my government estimated we needed 75 billion of our money, Malawi Kwacha, our money, okay? 75 billion. In 1 year, 2017, 27 billion, 1/3 of that money came in 1 year from NGOs, in 1 year. But that's not the end of the story. That 27 billion came from less than half of the NGOs that work in the water sector in my country, 27. It came from 27 NGOs, yet there are 80 NGOs in my country. So the other 53 did not report how much money they were bringing in. Now, how much money is coming in then? If my country needs 75 billion, 1/3 is only coming from 27 of them, and the other 53 are refusing to report how much money they're bringing in. Imagine how much wastage is happening. And that's the other dimension of accountability. So what is the net effect of all of this from my perspective? The net effect is that there's potential for wastage. And this is very common. You have one village having more water points than they need, and another village having nothing. That is on the ground. I've seen it with my own eyes. You have boreholes that are breaking down that shouldn't. You have boreholes that are supposed to last between 15 and 25 years. But in many cases, 1/4 of them fail in 4. Yet they're supposed to go up to 15 or 25 years. So, and this is because of bad, not adhering to standards. So these are the two impacts: wasted investments, money going where it shouldn't go, and hand pumps that are failing before they should fail. And this leaves people destitute. And we made them dance for it.
Oh, my heart. This conversation, I mean, literally, I'm angry too. I'm angry. I'm
It needs
angry.
to be said.
I am. Yeah. It's an understatement to say that I'm angry. Even my country, where I come from, Liberia, something around 75% of our GDP is from aid money, and yet where are we? Where are we?
40% from Malawi.
It's insane, insane. Christelle, I would love to ask you. We've just heard about the impact of international agencies that international agencies have in Malawi on water access. Do you experience the same things in Rwanda as a water entrepreneur?
Yes, and absolutely. I'll kind of draw on what Muthi already said, because a lot of that is also in Rwanda. And in our case, actually, the government coordination tries a lot. Within Rwanda, where we meet at the ministerial level in a sector working group, at district level, because we're very decentralized in Rwanda, at district level, there is a joint action development forum where everyone submits their action plan so that the district can make one unified plan of everything that's going to happen. And this is meant to avoid the application of efforts. And then we also have a water board at the district where all the water companies now are there to deal with different issues. Like if we notice quality issues with a certain water point, the water board could close it or take more actions and stuff like that. But despite that, we're involved at all those forums. And remember, we're building water points and expecting to make a return by selling the water to users. And they're willing to pay for it as long as it's reliable. But water is one of those things that the availability of a competing free water source can lead to loss of users. So we've had time and time again, it starts slowly, it's done in the public. You're reading the newspaper and there is a tender for building boreholes in your sector where you're already providing water and they don't need water. And do you know why that sector was chosen? They have the most amount of people. So you have all these villages that have, let's say, 100 people, 300 people that are being ignored by everybody. And then everyone is trying to do one borehole that should really service 500 people, but they want that borehole in a community of 3,000 so they can claim all 3,000 users, even though there was already an existing water source. So you find that the same large communities nearby roads, so they're easy to access, right? They don't want to drag their donors through bad roads for the opening ceremony. So you find there is intervention in the same communities. Now, one aspect of this I really want to draw on what Muthi said. It's done, some of this is done even publicly. Why was a tender to provide water in that particular area already launched? And how do we stop it when it's at a point like that? So we see the tender, somebody bids, and next thing you know, there is new water points popping up, which are not gonna have any maintenance and no follow-up. So you can expect them to be broken after a while. But in the meantime, as a business, we're losing revenue. We're losing some customers to these other non-sustainable water sources while we're trying to sell the water at an affordable cost. So that's one side of the problem. In the worst of cases, these boreholes are installed without any type of filtration provided for. So we have areas, for example, where there's high levels of arsenic in the groundwater. We have areas where we know there is hardness in the water that should not be getting consumed by the population. For example, we found things like barium in the water points. We found things like arsenic, as I said, high levels of fluoride. And this water is being opened and they put a pump and they say it's safe to consume. Yet that water is not safe. And the water quality tests that are done on that water are not deep enough to us to look for all those issues. So you can find a community. For example, sometimes people show you, as Muthi said, for me, I go to the field, I see these things. People come and say, we've been using this water, and you can notice how their skin looks, how their teeth look. And it's like they've been consuming it for so long, they don't notice it's the water that's causing these issues because it's a silent type of killing that's happening. But that water is literally killing them when it should be safe water for them to consume. And that's how it was advertised to them. So when the borehole is opened, they never say, actually, this borehole had issues. So for example, we started a project to rehabilitate a lot of boreholes that were like, people were consuming this water before. So we're just gonna, rehabilitate, develop the well again, put a pump, and so on. And one, again, the depth issues happened. As Muthi said, the depth reported is not the depth we find. Second thing, you find boreholes that the community has been using before they were broken that contained levels of metal, of hard metals that shouldn't be allowed to go to the population without adding the filter first. So when find this, and this is through our own data sets, we were given a list of boreholes, they're broken, go and fix them. Community was using the water before, so we don't expect to find this kind of water quality challenges within the boreholes. So, and one of the biggest questions within accountability we really need to address. No one should be allowed to scale solutions that don't work.
Yeah.
And we need rigorous evidence to explain my solution is working, right? Even within my own work, I'm very careful. We go from pilot to testing to see, are we achieving the same results over and over and over again? And we've had roadblocks before where we found something, for example, when we found bad water quality and we knew we have to add softeners or at least granulated activated carbon filters to remove the hardness in the water. And that added to our cost. But unfortunately, before we started even realizing that, we had many people paying us to continue drilling boreholes or servicing water in areas where that was an issue. So there is a need for increased accountability. As the video Muthi played so greatly puts it, we need to know who are the good players and the bad players, expose them so that the people doing good, who are very careful to not scale things that don't work, are given more room and actually more access to funding to do things right. And then we drive the funding that is proliferating bad solutions, basically. And I can end with a big example, right? There is this project where they were giving fake babies to teenagers as a way to reduce teenage pregnancies. And it's something that scaled, but when they did an actual study to compare teenagers that were given that fake baby that cries and makes them see how bad it is to be, how hard it is to be a parent and so on, they actually found that kids who had been part of that program and given those babies actually had a higher rate of teenage pregnancy. So the baby did not deter them from wanting to have babies. It actually made them want to have babies. So anyways, that's right. It's an allegory of what we're talking about here. You know, if we keep scaling things that don't work, and these are lessons I'm learning myself, we really need to take time to prove that our solutions work before we're given the money to scale them. And everyone should be incentivized to do that, not just from a positive incentive of here's more money if you did an RCT, but very negative incentive as well of, hey, you provided bad water to people, there is a punishment for that. You can't just do bad interventions, play with people's basic need for people like water and be allowed to work free, and actually with your salary and a lot of more funding. It just doesn't make sense. And I think this is, as we talk about the future of water, we need to fix this problem of building things that we know will fail, or at least fail at such a high rate that we shouldn't just continue doing business as usual.
And if I could just add on a few things that she's just said very quickly, particularly about failed technologies. The African landscape is riddled with failed technologies, riddled with it. I can, again, if I had time, I would have shown you a picture of there was a pump called the Play Pump, which was a massively popular pump at some point. You know, it was endorsed by, everyone, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, everyone was throwing money at this technology. Basically, it's a merry-go-round that children play on that pumps water into a tank. Everyone was celebrating this. The thing is, it was being shoved down our throats, and yet nobody thought about what is the supply chain of spare parts that should be available to enable this thing to happen. Is there the technical capacity to actually repair this thing? And they forgot to tell us that it would take about 25 hours to fill the tank. They just happened to forget to tell us that. Now, in Malawi at the moment, there's an office for a district water office. This is a government official responsible for water in a district. There is something we call the Play Pump Graveyard. I have a friend from Scotland, Professor Kalin. We love sharing this picture. It's all those, whatever you call those merry-go-rounds, just scattered all over in a garage somewhere, maybe 50 of them, because they all had to be removed. And every time I share that picture, I have to call him to confirm, are they still there? And they've been there for probably 10 years now. Again, an NGO-driven initiative, donors pushing us to do it, that failed, and we haven't learned our lessons from it. And oh man, and even this obsession with innovation. Everything is innovation. I mean, especially for example, this idea of using SMS. Yes, for example, there's this one example. Last point. There's this one example where these people put a solar power tank and all that, and they put a placard that says, if this fails, send a text message to this number, right? And the system had failed, and I sent a text message to that number. It didn't work. I made a phone call to that number. The number doesn't work. And I've been following that number since the 1st of December 2017. And still, the pump has not been fixed. So here's this, people are obsessed, donors are obsessed with telling us, oh, you need to come up with an innovation. But the problem it's not technical. The problem is not the innovation. The problem is, for example, in Egypt, it's the social inhibitors. In Christelle's case, it's more to do with, okay, her being a business, she's being undercut by NGOs who come in and provide these free services. Yet she's a sustainable service. She's a sustainable option. But yet, people. So for me, it's really frustrating. This coming in with all this technology and just dumping it as, oh, let's try this, let's try that. And when it fails, we just, step away and it ends there. No accountability. So for me, this thing of accountability and dumping things in Africa, all this innovation and technology, this Silicon Valley culture, it won't work here. What Christelle has said, step by step, try it, test it. It's not sexy. It takes time, but some things need time.
Absolutely. And oh gosh, I absolutely one of the issues that are the sexy things that I hear all the time is just tech-based everything, everything. And that's what's getting the funding now. It's like, if it doesn't have an app connected to it, it's not going to work. It's not scaling fast enough. And it's like, tech is going to save Africa. We're going to bring Silicon Valley to Africa, and it's going to save billions of people. I mean, just insane.
Fail fast, fail big. It's more like fail big in Africa.
Fail big, right?
It's fail big. We fail big.
Christelle, I would love to ask you, for the billions of dollars available in philanthropic money, there are trillions available in private capital. The water sector, though, is currently underfunded. So is it possible to improve the water sector using private financing? Let's talk about private investment in the water sector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that's emerging, and I mean, as a company, we're also kind of riding that wave and seeing way ahead. But people have to understand that investment in water sector, whether you're a developed country or a developing country, they're low risk. People will need water all the time, but that also makes them low return and really long term. So they're suitable for some type of investment. It's not every private investment, but also I believe we have lost almost purpose even by adopting this idea that's really espoused by NGOs that people should not pay for their water. People need to pay for their water. It has to be affordable, but actually to make it truly affordable, more people have to pay for it. Right? They pay a small price, but then we keep the taps running for everybody. So I always clash with people that believe if they paid for the water system to be established, then they have a say to say, no, give the water to the community. They're too poor to afford this water. And this is something we fight against. You can't have enough philanthropic money to cover the sector. There needs to be a bigger level of private participation in the water sector. And the different traditional actors really need to make a way for this. So if private investments are happening alongside philanthropic investment that don't want people to pay for their water, then we're kind of walking and then going backwards at the same time. So we need to protect poor people who are vulnerable, but not every rural resident in Africa, not every farmer is poor, not every person who's poor is vulnerable. So we need to establish what affordability is, and then let the market have a participation into a sector that is very critical. So there is a role for regulators, and I'm not saying that role shouldn't be there, but I believe public investment needs to be matched by private investment so that we can see more progress in this sector. If I draw parallels to the electricity sector, it has way more investment than the water sector. and it is not even a basic need. So we need to go from relying completely on non-profit financing to having some level of long-term, low-risk, and then low margin expectation kind of money within the water sector. And there is a lot more of that money out there than actually philanthropic money. So if pension funds want a good investment, why not invest in water project? There is also kind of the other part of the issue where, although a lot of the water system in the developed world were built almost for free, right? One can say by looting some other countries on a certain continent. But now a lot of the water systems in Africa are being built using loans, sometimes which might be even predatory in nature. So we need to also have a bigger conversation around how we finance the water sector, how we tap into the pool of what more widely available private financing, but do it in a way that is consistent with people's ability to afford, while also really remembering that affordability varies by the person, and that the ability to keep things affordable has to match with the ability that everyone pays something, right? Don't give it for free, charge everybody something, and then you can cross-subsidize across sectors. So what we're finding in our own company is within a region, you're going to have a few systems that make a lot of money. And then you have systems that, the margin is not very interesting, but they're not losing you money. And you have your random one or two systems that actually do lose money to keep them running. But from a company perspective, once you add up everything, you are making money. And you actually, by densifying in the same area, you reduce your operating costs. You can fix the same systems within a similar area where you cross-subsidizing on a regional basis. So there is room for private investment, and I think that's the route we need to go to pull in more more capital in general into the water sector.
Thank you so much, Christelle. I just want to close before we move to, I want to give some time for Muthi to help us answer some of the questions from the Q&A, but just I want to close with one question, just in general. We talked about the accountability issue when it comes to technologies for water access that are provided in rural areas. We've talked about the social issues. We've talked about a bit of the transboundary issues, collaboration issues. Who should hold organizations accountable? What is currently stopping it? And what are the accountability measures and regulatory frameworks that we should put on these organizations?
Okay.
And I know that's a loaded question. Let's try to quickly.
Okay, I'll
quickly
try.
answer it.
I'll be very quick. Ideally, governments should hold NGOs, international agencies accountable, because the governments are the custodians of the water resources. Period. But let's be practical. In the case of my country, the governments are beholden to the development agencies. I mean, you spoke about 75% of your country's, I think you said 75% of your country's national budget is donor funded, 40% for Malawi. So governments are beholden to donors. So as much as I would want governments to hold NGOs accountable, that might not happen soon. It may not happen as fast as I would want. At the moment, the only way NGOs are going to comply is if donors tell them to comply. I think that because there's no incentive for NGOs to follow standards, none. There's no incentive for NGOs to coordinate amongst themselves, none, no incentive. If the donors make it a point that you must coordinate, NGOs will do it. They'll not do it because they just want to be nice. I mean, I always give the example of Wall Street. Wall Street banks will not. They'll only follow the bare minimum in terms of rules. They'll never do more than what is required because there's no incentive for them to do that unless they are made to. And I think NGOs, unless they are made to follow the standards, they'll not do it. And I think only donors can do that. And there should be a conversation between donors and the national government to enable that to happen, so that government says the people you fund have to coordinate, the people you fund have to follow the standards. Now, there's another layer of complexity because some donors don't talk to each other because there's some geopolitical differences and conflicts at the geopolitical level, but that's a conversation for another time. But at the moment, the practical thing to do is national government pressurize donors to make sure that NGOs are following standards. And if they fail to do that, the donor has to be held accountable.
I want to jump to some of the Q&A before we have to leave today. One of the Q&A questions, Muthi, what does it look like when a community holds a bad implementer accountable?
I'll give you a practical example. Just 2 weeks ago in my country, a chief of a local village stopped a driller from drilling after a pumping test failed, right? Well, a pumping test is a test you need to do. Now, all along, communities just sit there and they watch the driller do everything without understanding what's happening. In this particular case, because we explained to them what the data meant and what they should look for, they were able to stop them and say, no, we don't want this water point here. You have to drill someplace else because the pumping test has failed. That is what accountability looks like. Accountability is women taking a NGO or a driller to court for giving them a bad water point, because those women deserve a right to water. That is what accountability looks like in my context. So the first example is an actual one that happened 2 weeks ago, but this one is the one I would like to see, that NGOs are actually sued for giving people bad water.
Thank you. Christelle, quickly, another question. In your example of big versus small communities, how does your company navigate recovering costs in small communities, cross subsidy from the larger community, or have you been able to have small communities stand on their own for costs? If you could quickly answer before we close.
Yeah, the main one is cross subsidy, but then at the same time, we're able to monetize our impact through carbon credit, and we're trying to also monetize the uptime hours we're able to get. So that's a new mechanism I learned that I was actually sharing with Muthi. But there's all kinds of funding mechanisms that are coming into the sector to reward people who are doing things right, ensuring that water points are running and producing water. But so far for our company, it's been really cross-subsidizing across a region of water points to even cover OPEX and all the other costs, but also throwing in some carbon credit. One other thing is, as a water company, you shouldn't just sell water. There is other materials you can sell that are higher margin, like, for example, storage tanks, sinks, different water products like that, which can be of a higher margin for you and which the community is always in need for. And that close proximity you have with the community when you provide water is something you can definitely monetize and upsell them more products.
Thanks, Christelle. I just wanted to tell everyone, thank you so much for your time. This has been an amazing conversation. I can't wait to continue this conversation offline. If you have any other questions out there to live stream, you can reach out to any one of these illustrious panelists through LinkedIn. Again, thank you so much. This has been really, really motivating for me as someone working in the water sector as well. And I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Can't wait to come to Malawi and Rwanda.